You can do it. So to every one of you here, reach deep into your soul and see what you can create. So how did I get into blockchain? Well, it was my son. That's why I'm telling you I think you can change your parents. So in 2010, he said to me, Mum, they've invented this new digital currency. It's called Bitcoin. You should buy some. And I didn't buy any. And then in 2016, he came and said, Mum, did you buy Bitcoin when I told you to buy Bitcoin? And I think by then it was maybe $1,000. And I said, no. And he said, now, Mum, I'm telling you this time, Bitcoin is built on blockchain, and blockchain is going to change everything, and you need to learn about it. So I went, oh, okay. So I started watching YouTube, reading books. There were no books, so no books to read, and looking at the internet and just trying to learn. And it was really confusing to me. And I couldn't understand it. The technology was confusing. It's counterintuitive when you've grown up believing that centralised systems is the way you do things. And it took me a long time to really figure out why my son had told me that blockchain was going to be a technology that changed things. But then one day, maybe 6 months into 2016, when I had accumulated a lot of confusing knowledge in my head, I kind of had an epiphany about the first way I saw a blockchain use case. And that was for a humanitarian disaster. So, I don't know if any of you remember the Indian Ocean tsunami of Boxing Day 2014. And my company at the time was working in Banda Aceh. And after the tsunami, we came up, 200,000 people were washed to sea and lost their lives. And we were working on the health sector reconstruction. And on that day that I was thinking about blockchain and somehow Banda Aceh came into my mind, I suddenly realised that it wasn't just the tragedy of the disaster, but no one knew who was lost to sea. No one knew who were in the hospitals, who were in the camps. All the land records were gone, all the bank records were gone, all the health records were gone. People wanted to help, people wanted to send money to the people who were left behind, but they had no way to do that. And so suddenly in this moment, I went, but if somehow all of those records had been linked through a biometric and hashed onto a blockchain, it wouldn't have changed the tragedy, but it would have made the reconstruction and the rebuilding so much easier. And from that moment I went, I have to understand this technology, and I have to learn about it, and I have to tell people about it. Not about Bitcoin, not about cryptocurrencies, but actually about this technology that can change things and that can help the poor and the vulnerable. So that's how we came to London Blockchain Week. I convinced my company I was still working for to sponsor the London Blockchain Week hackathon, and we gave them the problem of a country called Papua New Guinea that has 85% of the population unbanked. And we gave that to 200 of the smartest technologists and innovators in the world and said, help us figure out how to solve the problem of financial inclusion in Papua New Guinea. And we had two streams there, we had two winners. One was Ish Goyal, the Indian technologist I spoke to you about, and the other was a French technologist. And we brought them to the country and we gave them an opportunity to test out their ideas. So that was the beginning. And from then, I was really driven to think about, well, that's humanitarian. What about healthcare? What about agriculture supply chains? What about secure data transfer of medical records? So I began talking about it, writing about it, trying to help people understand the ways in which this technology can be a change for good in the world. So if you think back, that's 2017. And for any of you who was in blockchain in 2017 or even knew about it, well, if you didn't, that was in the days where people were doing initial coin offerings. So they were raising millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, and sometimes billions of dollars for their startups, doing something called an initial coin offering. So there was a lot of people gathering around and making a lot of money. So it was actually hard to get a noise for social impact in those days. But I persisted, I talked about it, I wrote about it, and what I found was people started coming to me and saying, I didn't think about that. Really? Can I help you? I'm a developer. I but you know, if I can do something for you in my spare time, I want to do it. And so this was sort of the progression of my journey. And so then you might remember in 2018, those of you who remember blockchain in 2018, everything went really quiet because the US Securities Commission decided that it was a security, and so a lot of people stopped doing these token sales. And then the people who were just in it to make money, they fell away. But those people who were seriously building and doing projects, they kept building. Then the next big thing that happened in blockchain really, and this is why I'm going to talk about the metaverse, was the pandemic. And what happened in the pandemic? Well, two things happened in the pandemic. One was that suddenly we had a health crisis, but it was a health crisis we couldn't deal with hands-on. We had to figure out how to work remotely, we had to figure out how to look after patients remotely, we had to figure out how to securely exchange data, we had to figure out how to make sure that the PPE equipment was actually safe and the proper equipment that was going to protect people. So there was huge blockchain innovation in healthcare. Then the other thing that happened during the pandemic is all the developers stayed at home. And I've actually heard developers say, I love the pandemic. I didn't have to go out, I didn't have to talk to anyone, I could just keep on, you know, building my projects. And so we saw huge innovation taking place in blockchain. We saw the explosion